Hi, music fans, and welcome to another one of my top tens, another poll. And today I thought I'd give you my favorite rock and roll artist. And yeah, as a lot of people know already, I'm big into my rock and roll. It's my first love. I love classic rock. I love rock pop. I love all types of different music. I even love some of the crooners, Matt Monroe and Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and love all the classic rock stuff like CCR and the Doors and stuff like that, and of course rock pop stuff like Rod Stewart, Phil Collins. But I think my first love has always been late 50s rock and roll, which I still go back to all the time. It's still my favorite music of all time. So I thought I'd give you my top 10 favorite artists from this era. So we're talking about the late 50s, probably around from about 55, 56 to 1960, maybe pre-Beatles, 61, 62. So at number 10, I have the fantastic Billy Fury. And yeah, I wasn't really going to put Billy Fury into this list because um, when I started thinking about all the songs I love from Billy Fury, it's mostly love songs. It's mostly some of them big ballads he did in the early 60s, like Once Upon a Dream and Jealousy and Halfway to Paradise and I'll Never Find Another You and so forth. But I put him in this list because of this album, The Sound of Fury, which I think is one of the best rock and roll albums of all time. It's definitely one of the best British rock and roll albums of all time. Just a fantastic album. Has one of my favorite Billy Fury songs on it, Turn My Back on You, which is one of the great kind of forgotten rockabilly numbers, which is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love it. And this album features the fabulous Joe Brown on guitar, who's still rocking to this day. But yeah, so I wasn't really going to put, even though Billy Fury is one of my favorite singers of all time, I wasn't really going to put him on this list. But this album, I think, got him on this list. Sound of Fury. So number 10, Billy Fury. And number 9, it seems kind of crazy that this artist is so low in my top 10. But when you do a top 10, some people are lower than other artists. Because I consider this one of the greats of rock and roll. Little Richard. What a singer. What a voice. What Long Tall Sally is just one of my favourite tracks of all time. I still love it. Yeah, it's just incredible sound from Little Richard. You can still kind of hear influences in. You can definitely hear influences from the Beatles and CCR and all the bands that followed them. And I still think he kind of, with his wildness and his kind of that screaming and the way he performed, I still think he influences artists to this day. So yeah, number 9 has to be Little Richard. So number 8 is another one. I can't believe it's so low on the list because, but it's Buddy Holly. Absolutely love Buddy Holly. I think the first Buddy Holly song I actually heard was "Crying, Hoping, Waiting," and it was featured in one of my favorite films of all time, La Bamba. I was a kid in the 80s, and I remember seeing that film, and pretty much that film changed my life because I absolutely love rock and roll. I think I loved it before, but I loved it even more after that. But this song was featured in it by somebody playing Buddy Holly in the movie, and when I heard the original, then it's like, oh my god, it's so much better. And yeah, I've loved Buddy Holly ever since that movie, and of course I loved the Gary Busby movie as well. Was fantastic as well. Buddy Holly, yeah, it's crazy that he did. It's just kind of sad that he died when he did because he was coming up with ideas that nobody like overdubbing and putting multi tracks on on songs and even strings. Like nobody did that before Buddy Holly, and it'd be interesting to see what he would have done in the 60s because he definitely would have been. People said, "Yeah, these artists died when they did. They did. It's a good thing they died when they did because they wouldn't have been able to." Um, Progress into the 60s, but I think Buddy Holly would have came up with new and fresh ideas right through the 60s and into the 70s, maybe the 80s, but we never got the chance to see him, and it's just incredible back catalogue for such a short career. I love all his tracks. I love every single track he's ever recorded. True Love Ways kind of stands out to me because it's so beautiful. But one of my favorite rockers is Ray Vaughan. Absolutely love Buddy Holly. So Buddy Holly is number 8. Number 7 is the killer himself, Jerry Lee Lewis, and you couldn't leave him out of the top 10. Oh my God, Jerry Lee Lewis. He was the last man standing. He's just absolutely fantastic. Love Jerry Lee Lewis. I even love some of the later stuff he done, like Rocking My Life Away and stuff like that. Great Balls of Fire. Just like I had a cassette of Jerry Lee Lewis when I was really young, and it had about 10 tracks on it, which I just played to death all the time. And of course, Great Balls of Fire was there, Breathless, High School Confidential, his fantastic cover of Ray Charles' What I Say. Just fantastic tracks. And yeah, I still love Jerry Lee Lewis, so he's number 7. So number 6, like Buddy, is another one that we never got to see progress into the 60s. He died actually in 1960, and he's one of my favourite rockers, one of my favourite guitarists of all time. Eddie Cochran, and yeah, it's really sad that he was only 21, I think, when he died. I could be wrong. I think he was only about 21. I remember my dad had an album of his called the 25th Anniversary Album, which would have made it in 1985, so that album would have came out in 1985, so I was about 10, and I remember one of the songs I really loved from it was called Weekend, which I still absolutely love to this day. And again, there was going back to the film La Bamba, there was a guy playing Eddie Cochran in that film as well, Brian Sessler from Stray Cats, and he sang Summertime Blues, which I absolutely love his version of. But that kind of got me more and more into Eddie Cochran, and but I love everything that Eddie ever did as well. He has some amount of back catalogue. I mean, this CD alone has 60 tracks all played by Eddie Cochran, and when you consider I think he started in about 56, 57, and he died in 1960. So you're talking about 3 years of music, and it's like you have a CD of 60, 70 tracks on it, and they're all absolute classics. It would have been really nice to see what he would have done in the 60s. I know I read Daryl Hyman's book. He wrote a book on Eddie, and I believe that some of the songs that Johnny Burnett actually got, like You're 16, You're Beautiful, You're Mine, and Bobby V, Rubber Ball, and all that, they were all meant for Eddie Cochran to record. So it would have been interesting to hear his take on some of them tracks, but yeah, we never got to see him, and it's really, really sad. But we had what a legacy, what a amount of material we can still listen to. So Eddie Cochran, number 6. So I'm into my top 5 now. Top 5 favorite rock and roll stars of all time, and number 5 is of course Chuck Berry, which I still love to this day. I love every one of these artists to this day. This album was released around the time that he died a couple of years ago. And yeah, it features some great tracks on it, like Big Boys and Lady Be Good, and but Chuck Berry, like everybody covered Chuck Berry songs, from Elvis, even Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis. Of course, the Beatles covered a load of his stuff. Cliff covered his stuff. Ricky Nelson covered his stuff. Buddy Holly covered his stuff. Buddy Holly did a fantastic version of Brown Hill I'd Handsome Man as well. It's one of my favourite tracks of all time. Everybody covered Chuck Berry, and I'm not surprised because he was one of the absolute greats. And he's my number 5. So number 4 is two guys that weren't on any of my lists yet. I done a list of my favourite singers, I've done a list of my favourite bands, but I couldn't put them on either of them because these were a duo, and they're the fantastic Everly Brothers. And yeah, I got to see the Everly Brothers when they supported Simon and Garfunkel, probably about 15 years ago, I'd say it was. They supported them, they came on, they've done 4 songs, they've done Bye Bye Love with Simon and Garfunkel, they done Wake Up Little Susie, they did Let It Be Me, and All I Have to Do Is Dream. And it was an absolute dream come true to see the Everly Brothers live. And yeah, unfortunately 2 of them have passed away now, but I absolutely still love the Everly Brothers, and one of my favourite songs of all time is Let It Be Me. I absolutely love it. But they're on my rock and roll list because some of them rockers were absolutely fantastic. Boy, I love Wake Up Little Susie, When Will I Be Loved, Poor Jenny, yeah, Till I Kissed Her, um, Till I Kissed You, Claudette, Bird Dog. Just some absolutely fantastic tracks they had. And yeah, so then my number four, the Everly Brothers. So number three, Ricky Nelson, of course. I have always loved Ricky Nelson. He's one of my favorite singers of all time, whether he's singing ballads or. But I think he does the best version of Milk Cow Blues. I absolutely love that. James Burton on guitar. James Burton featured on a lot of his tracks. In the late 50s and early 60s, and I absolutely love Ricky Nelson, which is no surprise. Yeah, so Ricky Nelson, number three. So number two is, I mentioned, he was my number two favorite singer of all time. He's my number two rock and roller of all time. The king himself, Elvis, and yeah, I absolutely love Elvis. In particular, the 50s. As I said before, I love everything he done in the 50s. I love a lot of stuff he done in the 60s, and I like some of the stuff he done in the 70s, not too much. But the 50s to me was Elvis, and I absolutely love Elvis. And the Sun Sessions in particular, I absolutely love. That's Alright Mama. Misty Train is one of my favourite tracks of all time, featuring Scotty Moore on guitar, Bill Black on bass. Absolutely fantastic. Right up, the Beatles said he died when he went in the army in 58. I don't believe that's true. I think he just changed. He felt it was time for a change into the 60s, and of course, like he probably would have looking a bit silly still doing rock and roll in the 60s because music was changing. But even the Beatles changed every album, so I don't know what they're criticizing Elvis for. But yeah, Elvis still the king. I still love Elvis. So he's my number two. So number one, no surprise, of course, he's probably number one in probably nearly all my lists I've done, and it's Cliff, who they said was Britain's answer to Elvis, and Cliff hasn't denied that. He said he was Cliff was influenced by Elvis, but Cliff became Cliff himself. He wasn't a carbon copy of Elvis. He may have imitated him at the start, but didn't move it. His first single doesn't sound like anything Elvis ever recorded. So Cliff had his own style right from day one, and I absolutely love Cliff, especially the early stuff. 58 to 63, I think, is his golden era, and yeah, it makes him my favorite rock and roller of all time. Yeah, so Cliff's number one. So that's my top 10 just for fun. A couple of artists just missed my top 10, like Gene Vincent, Carl Perkins, Roy Orbison, who I feel like is a little bit like Billy Fury. I think him more for the ballads, but he did have a couple of rock and rollers. Ooby Dooby and Pretty Woman, I think, is a pretty good rock song as well. And Johnny Burnett as well. It just missed my top 10 as well. But it was just for fun, so who really cares? So that's my top 10 top rock and roll artists of all time. Thank you and bye.